Imagine moving into a neighborhood you thought would finally bring peace. Quiet streets, friendly neighbors, and the promise of safety. But instead, you find yourself trapped in a war over something you never expected, your loyal companion. That's exactly what happened to Sarah, a young woman who had already endured years of personal battles. Her emotional support dog, Max, wasn't just a pet. He was her lifeline. But when the HOA decided Max didn't fit the rules, Sarah found herself in a fight not just for her home, but for her very right to live in peace. What started as a simple letter in her mailbox soon spiraled into a storm that would expose the HOA's cruelty and test how far one homeowner was willing to go for justice. Sarah had bought her townhouse after saving for nearly 6 years. For her, it was more than property. It was independence, a place to finally heal. Life hadn't been easy. After a traumatic accident years ago, she battled anxiety and depression. The one constant that helped her recover was Max, her golden retriever. Max wasn't just any dog. He was her certified therapy companion, trained to calm her during panic attacks and give her the confidence to face daily challenges. At first, everything seemed fine. The neighbors adored Max. Children would run up to pet him, and even elderly residents would stop on their evening walks just to say hello. Sarah felt a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced in years. But peace never lasts long when an HOA is involved. One sunny morning, Sarah returned home from a grocery run and noticed a bright orange slip taped to her front door. At first, she thought it was a delivery notice, but when she read it, her heart dropped. Violation. Unauthorized pet. Immediate action required. The letter went on to state that the HOA had strict weight restrictions for pets. According to the rules, dogs in the community could not exceed 25 pounds. Max, being a full-grown golden retriever, was over 60 pounds. The letter demanded that she remove him from the property within 30 days or face escalating fines of $200 per week. Sarah froze on her doorstep, clutching the letter. Her therapy dog, the one thing that kept her grounded, was now being treated like a nuisance. The next evening, she attended the HOA board meeting, clutching Max's certification papers. The small room smelled of coffee and old carpet. At the head of the table sat Mr. Thompson, the HOA president, a man with a stern face and a reputation for being obsessed with rules. Sarah calmly explained her situation. She shared that Max was a certified emotional support animal, fully protected under the Fair Housing Act. She even handed them documents from her doctor. For a moment, she thought they might listen, but Mr. Thompson's face twisted into a scowl. "Rules are rules," he said sharply. "We can't make exceptions. If we let one oversized dog stay, what's to stop others from bringing in aggressive breeds?" The other board members shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. Sarah left the meeting with her hands shaking. Within days, the fines started. Letters flooded her mailbox. Some warned of daily penalties, others threatened legal action. Neighbors whispered about how the girl in 4B was breaking the rules. A few even stopped greeting her on their morning walks. But it didn't stop there. She soon realized the HOA had instructed the community's security patrol to report every time Max was seen outside. Sarah noticed men with clipboards watching her when she took Max on walks. She even received photos of Max taped to her door with the word violation scribbled across them. Her sanctuary was turning into a nightmare. One evening, when Sarah sat on her porch holding Max close, her neighbor Linda walked over. Linda was an older woman who had always been kind. She lowered her voice and said, "Sarah, don't let them scare you. I've seen this before. They bully people who don't fight back. But you have rights, and I can help you prove it." Sarah's heart raced. For the first time, she felt she wasn't completely alone in this fight. But what Sarah didn't know was that the battle with the HOA was about to escalate in ways she couldn't imagine, and Max's future in the neighborhood would hang in the balance. Sarah didn't sleep much that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she pictured Max being taken away, his golden fur fading down the street while she stood powerless on the porch. She couldn't let it happen. The next morning, fueled by equal parts fear and determination, she began researching her rights. Hours passed as she read article after article, and soon she realized Linda was right. Under federal law, housing providers were required to make reasonable accommodations for emotional support animals, regardless of HOA rules. Armed with this knowledge, Sarah drafted a letter to the HOA. She attached copies of Max's certification, her doctor's note, and highlighted passages from the Fair Housing Act itself. She wrote firmly but respectfully, making it clear she expected them to stop the harassment and remove all fines immediately. With a deep breath, she slipped the envelope into the HOA's Dropbox, praying they would finally back down. Days passed with no reply. Then one evening, Sarah returned home to find not relief, but a fresh notice taped to her door. This time, the tone was harsher. The board claimed her documents were insufficient and repeated their demand that Max be removed. At the bottom, bold red letters declared, "Final warning before legal action." Her stomach dropped. She felt cornered. That night, she called Linda in tears. Linda listened patiently, then said, "Honey, it's time to stop playing nice. These people think you're an easy target, but I've seen neighbors take them to court and win. You need an attorney. The very next week, Sarah met with a lawyer who specialized in housing discrimination cases. The attorney, Mr. Patel, was calm and reassuring. After reviewing her documents, he leaned back in his chair and said, "They don't have a leg to stand on. You're protected by federal law. If they keep this up, they'll be the ones paying you." For the first time in weeks, Sarah smiled. But the HOA wasn't finished. Instead of retreating, they doubled their efforts. Security patrols followed her more aggressively. One morning, she found her trash cans overturned with another violation notice stuffed inside. On another occasion, a board member actually confronted her mid-walk, pointing at Max and shouting, "Every day you keep that dog here is another fine." Neighbors began avoiding her altogether, afraid to be seen siding with the rule. The pressure was suffocating, but Sarah held her ground. She filed a formal complaint with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, with Mr. Patel guiding every step. Linda stayed by her side, often walking with Sarah and Max just so she wouldn't feel so alone. Still, there were nights when Sarah broke down in tears, clutching Max like a lifeline. The stress made her anxiety worse, but every time Max rested his head on her lap, she remembered why she was fighting. She wasn't just standing up for herself, she was standing up for everyone in that neighborhood who had ever been bullied into silence by the HOA. Then came the day that changed everything. A certified letter arrived at her door. Her hands trembled as she opened it, half expecting another threat. But instead, it was a notice that a federal investigator had been assigned to review her case. The HOA would soon be required to justify their actions, not to Sarah, but to the law itself. For the first time, it wasn't Sarah who felt cornered. It was the HOA. The weeks leading up to the investigation felt like a storm waiting to break. Sarah could see the tension in the neighborhood. Board members whispered during their evening walks, darting nervous glances her way. The once smug HOA president avoided her altogether, no longer daring to confront her in public. Word had spread that federal authorities were involved, and suddenly the balance of power shifted. When the day finally came, Sarah sat in her living room with Mr. Patel by her side. A HUD investigator sat across from them, reviewing the thick file of evidence. Sarah's letters, the fines, the threats, the photos of notices taped to her door. The investigator asked calm, pointed questions, and Sarah answered each one with quiet determination. At one point, she lifted Max onto her lap. The dog rested his chin on her arm, the very picture of why she was fighting. The HOA representatives arrived late and flustered. Their stack of papers was thin compared to Sarah's file. They stammered through their explanations, claiming they were simply enforcing community standards, but every excuse unraveled under the investigator's questions. "Did you receive her medical documentation?" "Yes. But did you continue to issue fines after receiving it?" Silence. By the end of the meeting, it was clear who stood on the right side of the law. The investigator closed his folder and said, "This appears to be a textbook case of discrimination. Further action will be recommended." Sarah's heart leaped, not just from relief, but from vindication. For weeks she had been treated like a criminal in her own neighborhood. Now, the truth was undeniable. The fallout came fast. The HOA received an official notice that their actions had violated federal law. They were ordered to drop all fines, cease harassment immediately, and attend mandatory training on housing rights. To add insult to injury, the HOA had to pay a settlement that covered Sarah's legal fees, and then some. The very money they had wasted chasing her became the funds that freed her from financial strain. Neighbors who had once avoided her began stopping by again, offering quiet congratulations. Some even confessed they had faced bullying from the HOA themselves, but never had the courage to fight back. Sarah had unknowingly become a symbol of resistance. One evening, as the sun set over the quiet cul-de-sac, Sarah sat on her porch with Linda. Max played happily in the grass, free and unbothered. Linda smiled and said, "You did it, honey. You stood up to them, and you won." Sarah nodded, her chest swelling with pride. "I wasn't just fighting for me," she said softly, watching Max chase a butterfly. "I was fighting for everyone who deserves to feel safe in their own home." The war with the HOA was over, and Sarah had come out stronger. She hadn't just protected her dog, she had reminded an entire neighborhood that no one is above the law, not even those who claim to enforce it. And as Max curled up at her feet, Sarah realized she finally felt something she hadn't in months: peace.